Welcome back, party people. It's time for the Patreon exclusive comic book review this week. You had several very, very good choices. There really wasn't a bad choice amongst them. You had from Marvel Ultimate Spider-Man. From DC, you had the New Gods #1. And on the indie scene, we had Flash Gordon. And you all chose the New Gods #1, Ram V writing, Evan Cagle on art. And I have been a long-time proponent of Ram V writing comic books. I think he's done a fantastic job in a lot of spots. You know, These Savage Shores certainly stands out as something that he did that was absolutely fantastic. The Many Deaths of Layla Starr. He's done a lot of really cool stuff on the indie scene. And his first real breaks at DC, I thought went really well. He was doing those backup Justice League dark stories that I thought were pretty darn good. He had a Catwoman series that wasn't bad at all. His Future State Swamp Thing was absolutely awesome. Got him the Swamp Thing gig. I was like, wow, this is perfect. It turns out it wasn't perfect. He didn't really do anything, and it just ended up being 18 issues of like kind of just excruciating squatting, which was a precursor for his Detective Comics run, which went on much longer than that. He didn't really do anything. He told one story, and he didn't even tell it well because he didn't get an ending. So I came into this book more apprehensive on a Ram V project than I have been in a long, long time, even though I did really like Dawn Runner this year. I thought that was a really cool indie project that also had Evan Cagle as the artist on there. Evan Cagle had actually been doing, I think, a lot of the variant covers, or maybe no, the A covers for his Detective Comics run. Really good artist, fits Ram V style. And I must say, bottom line up front, I'm very impressed with this comic book. I don't think we're going to get Ram V squatting on the New Gods for like 3 or 4 years doing absolutely nothing. He actually starts it out pretty darn good. And I'd had a couple of people behind the scenes be like, oh, you're going to like that. I'm like, we'll see. Because Ram V has been kind of letting me down at DC Comics, and he does not let me down whatsoever here. New Gods, obviously a really interesting concept. You get Darkseid, Apocalypse, New Genesis, Highfather, Orion, Mr. Miracle, Big Barda, Granny Goodness. I know I'm forgetting a few characters out there. Light Ray certainly plays a part in this comic book issue, all courtesy of the king himself, Jack Kirby, when he went from Marvel over to DC. Really cool concept. When it's done well, it's really, really fascinating and really cool stuff. When it's not done well, it can get stuck in the weeds and do nothing for a very long time. And this is done really, really well, mostly highlighting Highfather. I thought there was really good characterization on him. I thought there was some really cool characterization on Light Ray as well. But there's a conversation in here between Orion and Mr. Miracle that I thought absolutely kicked butt and took names. So I'm definitely recommending this bad boy. Now let's get into the details on why I think Ram V absolutely knocks it out of the park with the New Gods #1. Feels like a return to form for Ram V, especially at DC Comics. I will fully admit, the first few pages, I was a little bit nervous. We're going to the Source Wall. We've got Metron going there to receive, I believe, like pure truth or whatever in the form of what's going to be prophecies for his father, Highfather, because of the death of Darkseid and the changes that it's going to bring into the universe because it's no longer in balance. You needed Darkseid energy to balance out Superman's Superman energy, I guess. And with that being pulled from the universe, since he essentially killed himself, death via Justice League within All In Special #1, the universe is unbalanced. And there is a prophecy that there's been a baby born that will be potentially a great threat to New Genesis and Highfather. The first 4 pages does come off as a tad bit pretentious, and I was like, what were people thinking? This doesn't start out well at all. But thankfully, it's only like 3 or 4 pages at the very, very beginning, which had me a little bit turned off to the story while being illustrated very well. And the entire comic book is illustrated very, very well. I'm very excited for Evan Cagle getting this kind of break. I think he's the perfect artist for this book. But then once we get into it, it really hits high gear. I thought there was some really cool characterization on Light Ray. It's not a lot there. Highfather receives the prophecies from Metron, and he says, bring me my champion. And Light Ray comes up, very, very excited, and he thinks he's the champion. And you kind of feel bad for him because you get the feeling, just in this very, very brief moment here with Highfather, that there's nothing that Light Ray wants to do more in this world than make Highfather proud, make him happy, and feel like he could be his champion. But alas, that is not who Highfather himself was looking for. He says, "Not you, child, not for this task. Where is Orion?" And you kind of feel bad for him there. And certainly being like a middle brother or somebody that's been looking for opportunities during different parts of my career and stuff, I could totally relate to how that moment must have felt for Lightray. And while it's a very brief moment, I think it was some of the best characterization in the entire comic book, and definitely immediately makes you feel something for Lightray and kind of understand that Highfather, while he's certainly got a lot of responsibilities and all that kind of stuff, kind of a dick. It made me not rooting for him. And if that wasn't enough, once we get to the details of why he's calling in Orion, then you'll really hate the guy. After that, we do get the introduction of Orion, and I thought it's done really, really well. He's out there fighting the parademons that are kind of coming out and going wild now that Darkseid isn't there to kind of keep them in balance, whatever, as the champion of New Genesis. And you even get some really cool hand-drawn like Orion introduction, almost with like a logo with body parts in it, as he's kind of defeating the enemies of his father's kingdom and all this stuff. And I thought it was illustrated really, really well. And I love the Orion part of it. I thought it just stood out as being really, really cool. Not all indie comic book artists are going to work on a Big Two style book. And I think Evan Cagle is making a name for himself. Not quite as awesome as the Nick Dragotta Absolute Batman stuff. It's right up there with it, in my opinion. And I thought it just looked so cool and it was such an awesome introduction and really just kind of emphasized what a complete badass, what a specimen Orion is. And he's definitely nobody that you would want to mess with. And even on the R, it looks like somebody was like thrown through the bottom of the R. Looks like there's body parts that went through it. I thought all that was really cool little accoutrement on the character of Orion to really emphasize this is the last dude in this universe that you really want to be pissing off. And he's probably the right choice for Highfather to be bringing in for this special mission now that he's gotten this prophecy from Metron. And that kind of all leads us to what I thought was the most powerful, interesting moment. And I've liked essentially all of this except for the first 3 pages up to this. And it kept getting better and better and better. And that's really what you want from a comic book. You want it to build up like a crescendo as you're building the tension and the stakes and the characterization, and you're buying into the story, and it just kind of gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And when we meet Mr. Miracle, it was very much, it felt very much like the Tom King Mr. Miracle series, where Big Barda is pregnant, he's about to be a father. Is he ready for this? Can he escape fatherdom type of thing? Which was an interesting series about 4 or 5 issues in, and then it kind of goes to hell because it was Tom King or whatever. So it feels like they're picking up there, but the character Mr. Miracle does mention, the Big Barda, she's completely worn out. She's got the Birds of Prey stuff. We've got our daughter, which I thought was a son to begin with. And I think that was supposed to be like an okey doke, because in the prophecy, I believe it's prophesized as being a girl, although I thought Big Barda had a boy with Mr. Miracle, and they're talking about the daughter and everything. And I think you're supposed to think that maybe, just maybe, Orion has come for their daughter. But that's not exactly what he's there for. But he is asking Mr. Miracle to perform an enormous magic act. Turns out Highfather is a complete scumbag, going Old Testament all the way on this one. There's been a child born. There's a prophecy about it. The child could present a threat to Highfather in New Genesis itself. So he sends Orion, and Orion's task is to kill the baby. Orion, despite being the champion of New Genesis, and certainly a badass dude, and even shows his real true face, being like the son of Darkseid or something like that, which I thought was really a really cool moment in here, does not want to kill this baby. In fact, it's the last thing he wants to do, which kind of shows you that he's being put in a rock and a hard place. He's going to do exactly what Highfather tells him to do because he's loyal and he's efficient, and he's going to get the job done no matter what. And he knows that, but he doesn't want it to happen, and he thinks the only person in the world that can prevent him from killing this child is Mr. Miracle himself, and wants him to pull off the greatest escape trick of all time. He wants him to find the baby, disappear her to where he cannot find her, and protect her and make sure that she doesn't die, which I think was a really, really, really cool twist on this. Didn't exactly see it coming, and I thought, wow, that is a perfect mission for Mr. Miracle. He finally gets to escape his day-to-day life. He gets to have some more excitement. He's obviously probably going to bring his family with him Although Bart is still on the Birds of Prey, but who cares about that? The Birds of Prey sucks. This book is good. And I thought it created this enormous conundrum, although Mr. Miracle himself was like, no. In fact, I don't want to do that. You're off your rocker. I ain't got time for it. I got a wife and kid, and I've got too much stuff on my plate already. I can't be taking care of another baby. And he's like, listen, dude, now that he's given me this task, there's literally nothing that can stop me except for maybe you. I'll give you 7 days to find the child and make your disappearing act, and then I'm coming full bore for it. And I thought that was a really cool setup because Orion knows he can't stop himself. And then we do, by the end, learn at least portions of the identity of the baby. It turns out she's from India. It makes sense. A lot of the components that Ram V likes to throw in his comic book stories do ultimately go back to India, where I think his family is from. And we have a father carrying his daughter. We have a wife. They're running away from some type of special forces people. They're clearly bad guys, and they don't care about the dad. They don't care about the mom. They just want the child. Apparently, Highfather and Orion and Mr. Miracle are not the only ones interested in this particular baby in India. And we do get some tragic events. I don't want to go into too much detail, although I do think I've spoiled this book too much already. But you really can't talk about it in the moments and the impact of them without actually getting into some of the detail, because that's really where all the minutia of the story is and where the character development comes from, especially from Mr. Miracle. We do see what happens with the baby and the potential powers that she has. It's very celestial-like is the way that I took it when you see it happen. And I thought it was really cool. And my big question coming out of this, is this child the reincarnated spirit of like Darkseid? Is this Darkseid reborn? Is that what they're setting up here? I believe that's too obvious, but that's kind of what it felt like. And that's definitely the question that was on my mind by the end of this comic book, and what this child represents, where this child came from. Obviously, with the death of Darkseid and all that stuff going on there, the entire universe out of balance, and the inhabitants, the kingdom of a New Genesis itself, having to kind of keep things in order and maintain their power and all that kind of stuff. I thought this was an absolutely intriguing comic book. I was very, very impressed with what Ram V set up here. Yes, there are some Ram V-ish moments at the very beginning, but once he gets into the story, you get a lot of good characterization. You get some really cool moments, and that conversation between Mr. Miracle and Orion I thought was really, really interesting stuff, and threw a big old twist on this comic book that I didn't totally see coming, but I'm glad it's in there. And it does feel like this comic book has a story to tell and a place to go that I do think was lacking essentially from the very beginning of Detective Comics, where I think with Detective Comics, my impression after reading the entire thing was Ram V had a tone he wanted to set, and he had a style that he wanted to present. But I don't think truly he had a story that he needed to tell or even wanted to tell about Batman and Gotham City and this opera type thing with the Oregon family and all that stuff. And that's why he was just kind of like stuck there doing kind of creepy stuff with very atmospheric storytelling, but essentially going nowhere. In my opinion, this story has already gone further than his Detective Comics run. And it feels like he has an end game in mind, and he's looking to tell some interesting things and really represent his interpretation of the New Gods, obviously created by perhaps the greatest American comic book creator of all time, Jack Kirby himself. So I think this is really good. Ranking it's hard. I think the art is fantastic. I think it suits the story perfectly. Yeah, there are a couple moments in the beginning that I don't love, but I give this I would like a 4.5 out of 5, a 9 out of 10. Highly recommend. It's right in between like an 8.5 and a 9. It's a really good comic book. If you missed this one, I feel bad. Go check it out. I'm sorry if I spoiled too much of it. But if you didn't miss it and you want to have a conversation about it, definitely want to hear from you guys, because now this is normally exclusive to Patreon. It is going to be up on the YouTube for Christmas week, because we're showing everybody all the wonderful things that we present on the Patreon every single week, and have a really good time doing that. Hope to see you there if you're interested. This comes out on the Past the Helmet tier, the lowest tier. But if you want to vote for the comic book, you do have to be on the Daka's Right tier, which is the highest one, which gives you basically voting ability and all that kind of stuff, and the ability to present questions and stuff. Hope to see you on the Patreon. If you're interested in more stuff like that, that's the place to be. There's a link in the video description.